A boot heel caught the side of Elijah's ribs, sending him tumbling through the dirt beside the saloon steps. He didn't cry out, couldn't, just curled tighter, arms shielding his face as laughter scraped across the porch like dry corn husks. Useless mutt. One of them spat, swinging open the saloon door with a wheeze of rusted hinges. Ain't even worth the flies that follow him. The door slammed. Silence returned, brittle and stinking of sour beer and horse piss. Elijah stayed down, waited for the silence to settle. His lips cracked with blood, dust catching in his lashes. One eye opened, brown as creek mud, and watched a crow shuffle across the water trough. He crawled to his feet. The sky was an oven lid, blistering and low. Sweat and dust clung to his neck like another skin. He limped toward the alley behind Kelly's saloon, where the trash got dumped and no one bothered to look. Something moved. Not the usual rats or vultures. Not the drunkard who'd passed out 2 days ago and hadn't stirred since. A boot. A small one. Elijah froze, staring. The boot twitched. Bare toes poked from the torn leather, scraped and bleeding. He edged closer. Behind the overturned barrel and pile of sun-bleached crates, a figure curled, motionless except for the slow rise of a rib cage under rough canvas. Long dark hair tangled in dust and flies. Skin coppery and scraped raw. Her leg, swollen, wrapped in something that might have once been white, leaked blood into the dirt. Her eyes opened. Black. Sharp. Full of pain and something else. Wild like a wounded bobcat. She hissed something, words he didn't know. Apache, maybe. Her hand moved toward a knife tucked at her side, but she couldn't lift it more than a few inches before her arm gave out. He didn't speak. Couldn't. But he raised both hands, palms open, slow as water dripping, and crouched beside her. Her gaze flicked from his hands to his face, then down again. Her breath rattled like wind through pine needles. Elijah glanced over his shoulder. Voices shouted inside the saloon. No one was coming out. He reached for the old burlap sack he kept hidden behind the broken fence slats. Inside, 2 apples soft, half a biscuit, a chipped tin cup, a rusted spoon, and a flask of water he'd stolen that morning. He poured a trickle onto a clean corner of the sack, then dabbed gently at the blood crusting her forehead. She flinched, then held still. Her lips parted just enough to sip from the cup. He held it steady. She drank like she hadn't in days. The sun dropped an inch lower, baking the alley in deeper shadow. A boot scraped gravel nearby. Elijah dropped flat, eyes wide. A drunk stumbled past the alley's mouth, belching and laughing. Didn't see them. Kept going. He looked back to the girl. Her eyes had closed again, her breath thinner. He couldn't leave her. The mine was 2 miles out, carved into the bluff where coyotes howled at night. No one went near it. Not after the collapse 10 years back. Elijah dragged a broken crate into a sled. Found an old horse blanket near the stable dump pile. He lifted her, awkward, careful. She moaned once, then went still again. Lighter than he thought. He tied the sled with wire and a rope fashioned from his belt and a length of fence twine. Then he pulled. Across sand, over dry creek beds, under dying cottonwoods. He didn't stop. Not when his hands blistered. Not when his knees gave out and he had to crawl the last stretch on all fours. By the time he reached the mine, the sky had cracked open with orange and crimson streaks. Coyotes were already starting to yip. He dragged her inside, into the cool dark, where the mine timber still held back the rot of time. He laid her on the blanket, lit a stub of candle he kept in a tobacco tin. Her face looked softer in the glow. Younger, not much older than him. He cleaned the wound on her leg with water and the last bit of cloth. She groaned in pain, but didn't wake. He wrapped it tighter with a strip from his own shirt. Then he sat back against the wall, candle flickering shadows onto the beams above, eyes never leaving her. Morning came with a howl. Elijah jerked awake to the sound of something fast. Boots. Not just one pair, many. Galloping. He crept to the mine's edge and peeked out. 6 riders. Guns slung low, riding hard toward the town. He caught sight of the lead man. Dust-colored duster. Gray beard, long and scraggly. Cold, hard eyes even at a distance. A bounty hunter. He'd seen him before. Langtree. They were looking for something. Or someone. Elijah turned back inside. The girl stirred, opened her eyes, spoke one word in a whisper. He didn't understand it. She reached for something in her coat, pulled it out with a trembling hand. A pendant, woven leather cord, a carved piece of bone, shaped like a hawk in flight. She pressed it to Elijah's chest. He didn't move. She held his eyes with hers and spoke again, quieter this time. The word fell like a stone in water. Then her hand dropped. Elijah stared at the pendant, felt it heat in his palm. Above them, thunder rolled across the sky without rain. The storyteller's voice lingers. That boy had nothing. No name, no words. Just dust in his veins and silence in his mouth. But the day he helped her was the day the wind remembered his name. Elijah hit the ground hard, palms tearing open against jagged shale. The sled jolted sideways, the girl sliding with a grunt as her shoulder cracked against the wooden frame. Her eyes shot open, bleary, bloodshot but awake. They'd reached the foothills. Above them, cliffs like broken teeth, jagged and red against the cloudless sky. The sun hadn't yet cleared the eastern ridge, but already the rocks steamed with morning heat. She tried to sit up, failed. Elijah didn't look at her. He was busy tying the rope again, splitting the twine into two thinner strands, anchoring it around the broken sled beam. His hands bled. His lips were black from thirst. "Shuli Khan," she rasped. He glanced over. She was pointing barely with her chin. A faint trail. Faded hoof prints on a sloped path leading west, snaking between boulders and brush. She tried again, slower. "Safe." He gave one nod, then pulled. The trail carved through sunburnt scrub, rising steadily toward a jagged pass known only to deer and ghosts. Ravens circled above, watching like judges. By midday, Elijah's legs shook with every step. The sled scraped and groaned behind him, catching on roots, rattling against stone. The girl, Sani, he'd learned, spoke little. Sometimes an Apache, sometimes a broken word of English. "See Chilezii, black brush. Water soon." But they hadn't seen water since dawn. His stomach had given up growling hours ago. Now it only ached, deep and cold despite the sun. He reached the edge of a dry gulch, 5 feet across, too steep to pull the sled through. Sani tried to rise. Her leg buckled. He caught her before she hit the stone. She gasped. Her skin burned with fever. Elijah looked at the far side, then back at her. He knelt, and without a sound, pulled her onto his back. She clutched his shoulders as he staggered across, first foot slipping, second catching just in time. His knee cracked on a rock. He didn't stop. On the other side, he laid her down gently, then climbed back to haul the sled over by hand. By nightfall, the world bled orange. Cicadas screamed in the sagebrush. A hawk screeched overhead and vanished into the cliffs. Sani moaned her sleep, brow slick with sweat. She whispered names, too soft to catch. Elijah pressed the canteen to her lips. Only a few drops left. He didn't drink. He lay beside her in the shadow of a dead juniper and stared at the stars as they blinked awake. First a few, then 100, then 1,000. The mountain wind cut sharp, but he didn't shiver. A sound woke him. Hoofbeats, distant but growing. Elijah scrambled to his knees, peeked around the stone outcrop. Far down the slope, a flicker of torchlight. Then 2 more. 6 riders again, same as before. He looked at Sani. She was already awake. Her eyes locked to his. She mouthed one word. "Run." He didn't argue. He rolled her back into the sled, gritting his teeth against the groan of leather and wood. He yanked the rope over his shoulder. The moon lit the trail like silver fire. They pushed through brush so thick it tore his arms. Scaled over ledges where stone cut his palms. The wind picked up, moaning through the peaks like some ancient spirit watching from above. Sani pointed left. Deer path. Narrow. Hidden. Twisting behind a stand of dry firs. They took it. Behind them, voices shouted. Echoes bounced across the canyon. Elijah didn't stop. Hours passed. The world turned colder. The pass narrowed until the sled barely fit. Twice he had to lift it sideways over roots. Once it caught on a fallen log, and he hacked it free with a jagged rock. Sani reached out, pointed toward a rock shaped like a sleeping hawk. She whispered near, but her breath wheezed. She was slipping. The trail opened into a dry basin surrounded by high walls, an ancient place. A circle of worn stones stood in the center, one broken in half. Sani's voice trembled here. Wait, they find me. Elijah laid her down in the center of the stones. She took his hand, thin fingers barely able to grip. She said something long in Apache, her voice soft, reverent, like prayer or apology. Then she pulled the pendant from her neck and pressed it into his palm. He shook his head. She forced it closed around the bow and hawk. You carry. Then she closed her eyes. The wind fell silent. Dawn crept over the ridge, slow and gold. Elijah sat with her, unmoving. Then he heard it, drums, not from behind, from ahead, from above. A single rider appeared on the rim of the basin. Dark skin, face painted red and white, eagle feathers braided into long black hair. Then another, and another. Soon, 30 horses stood around the ledge, silent as stone. One of them dismounted, moved slowly down the trail. An old man, eyes sharp as obsidian. He said nothing as he approached, just looked at Elijah, then at Sani. The old man knelt beside her, placed his hand on her forehead. She speaks of you, he said at last, his voice like cracking cedar. No tongue, no blood, yet heart strong. He turned and whistled. 2 riders descended, lifted Sani between them with great care. The old man looked to Elijah. You follow. Elijah blinked, looked down at his hands, still clutched around the hawk pendant. He nodded, but didn't move. Not yet. As the riders vanished into the rising sun, the boy sat alone in the basin, the wind whispering through the stones. The storyteller's voice returns, low and grave. The mountain took many, but gave back one, and the land remembered the boy with dust in his lungs and fire in his chest, who crossed the spine of the earth with death at his heels and silence in his throat. The girl was gone. Elijah's fingers curled around dead ash. The basin stood empty beneath the morning sun, just a circle of stone, quiet, hollow, and bare. No hoofprints, no scent, no sign. Only the wind remained, and it didn't speak. He staggered to his feet, swaying, eyes dry, skin cracked. The hawk pendant still hung from his neck, heavy now. Behind him, the trail yawned like a scar. He turned toward it and walked. The town of Red Rock Ridge didn't look different when he returned, but felt it, tight as a noose drawn one loop tighter. Men loitered in doorways. Eyes narrowed. Fingers rested on belt buckles where pistols hung loose. A new notice fluttered on the sheriff's board. Wanted, native girl, alive, $200. Elijah stared at it, then turned his head. The saloon stood as crooked as ever. The windows dark. The music inside slow and sour. Outside, a horse snorted, tethered to a post slick with old blood. The name burned beneath the paper's ink, Langtree. The door opened before Elijah knocked. Marshal Langtree stood there in his coat of dust and bone, beard like dried moss. One eye narrowed, the other half-lidded as if he'd already sized Elijah down to nothing. Well, I'll be, he drawled, voice slick with venom. The mute little flea returns. Elijah didn't flinch. Langtree stepped out, kicked the door shut behind him. You seen her. I know you did. Half-burnt tracker spotted a trail down by Widow's Cradle. Found that little scrape you call mine. Saw blood. He grinned. No teeth showed. Girl's worth coin. And I aimed to collect. Still, Elijah didn't move. Langtree leaned closer. Breath stank of whiskey and rot. Let me tell you how this ends, boy. You tell me where she went, I'll let you live. Lie to me. He drew the revolver half out of its holster. You go back to dirt. The hawk pendant glinted beneath Elijah's collar. Langtree's eyes locked on it. He struck. Elijah dropped hard, skull cracking against the step. Boots rained down, 1, 2, then many. His ribs shrieked. Vision blurred. Someone laughed. The world came back in flickers. Dried flowers. The smell of sage. A hand, warm and dry, pressing a cloth to his forehead. The widow. She hummed as she worked. Low, like a funeral song sung by someone too tired to cry. Her house smelled of time, Cedar, tobacco, rain long gone. Every shelf lined with jars. Every corner heavy with silence. "You shouldn't be alive," she muttered. "That's twice now." Elijah tried to sit. The pain pinned him like a stake. "Lie back," she said. She sat beside him, took his hand. Noticed the pendant. Her face changed. "I remember that," she whispered. "Your mother wore one." He blinked. The room spun slower. "She saved me once. Years ago, during the war. Confederate dogs torched half the town looking for Union spies. She found me in a ditch. Didn't say a word. Just healed." Her voice cracked. "She died for it." She touched Elijah's cheek, thumb rough but kind. And now her son carries that same silence. He tried to rise again. She didn't stop him. The town was quieter now. Too quiet. Langtree stood in the street. Alone. Waiting. The townsfolk peeked through shutters and cracks. None dared speak. He grinned when he saw Elijah. "Raise one hand. You're brave. Or stupid." Elijah didn't answer. Didn't move. Langtree's eyes narrowed. "You think those redskins are coming for you?" "For her." He spat. "They won't. We wiped most of them out years ago. Rest scattered like ghosts." The wind shifted. A sound rolled through it. Hooves. Langtree turned. His grin vanished. From the northern ridge, they appeared, silent, painted proud. 30 riders. The Red Hawk Riders. Each one wore the same symbol carved in bone. The hawk in flight. They came like thunder held in leather. At their center rode Sani, upright and fierce. Her eyes burned brighter than the sun. Langtree stepped back. "No," he muttered. "No, she was dying." He fumbled for his pistol. An arrow struck the wood beside his boot. Another near his hat. He froze. Sani dismounted. Walked toward Elijah. The circle formed around them. The townsfolk crept closer, silent. Sani stopped before the boy. She looked to her father, who sat tall atop a jet-black horse. "He is why I live," she said in clear, broken English. The old man nodded once. Langtree screamed and raised his gun. Before he could fire, Elijah moved. A blur. He was on him. The hawk pendant swung like a blade. Langtree's arm twisted, cracked. The gun dropped. Then the boy stood above him. Not trembling. Not afraid. Langtree spat blood. Reached for his boot knife. And then, a single shot. From behind. The widow stood on the porch. Her rifle smoking. Langtree's head hit the dust. Silence held. Then the old chief spoke. His voice is the wind. His hands speak fire. He looked to Elijah. "You have no tongue, but you carry honor." He reached into his robe, drew a second pendant, older, worn smooth by time. He placed it around Elijah's neck over the first. "You walk 2 paths now." Then he turned. The riders vanished back into the horizon, Sani among them. Elijah remained, alone, but not empty. The people watched him, not with pity, with reverence. The storyteller's voice returns, soft as smoke. The boy never spoke, never needed to, because when the riders came, they remembered, not just a girl, but the one who crossed the mountains for her, the one who stood between evil and thunder. And the land never forgot. Dust hung in the air like it was afraid to fall. Birds silenced. The ground, never quiet, held its breath. A dry leaf fluttered once across the porch of the old chapel, then didn't move again. Elijah opened the door. 30 riders stood waiting. No words, no challenge. Just 30 horses lined shoulder to shoulder, warriors atop them like carved stone, faces painted with blood and ash, eyes hard and still. Each one bore the mark of the hawk. Each one sat with their weapons resting across their laps, not drawn, not needed. Sani rode at the front, face shaded beneath the feathers of a war bonnet too large for her youth. She saw him, nodded. He stepped down from the chapel and walked through the doorway like someone who belonged to the land more than the wood and nails behind him. The townsfolk didn't dare blink. Doors creaked open just enough for faces to peer out. A boy tugged on his mother's dress. A gambler dropped his hand to cards without knowing why. Elijah stood in the middle of the street. Sani dismounted. Behind them, the wind began again, just enough to whisper. Now! Marshal Langtree's old lieutenants came first. 3 riders. Guns low, eyes twitching. The first raised his voice. This town don't belong to savages. The second added, or to a mute bastard. The third never finished his thought. Sani raised her hand, and the 30 warriors moved as one. Not forward, around. They circled the town. Fast. The sound was like thunder rolling over a canyon, echoing from every wooden wall, every rusted roof, until the people inside swore the earth itself had cracked. Elijah stood still at the center of it all, as if the storm passed through him. A woman screamed. One of Langtree's men fired a wild shot. The shot struck nothing. In answer, 3 arrows landed in the dirt around his boots, placed with precision like punctuation. The man dropped his gun. The other 2 bolted. From the ridge, the widow watched through her scope. She didn't move. Rifle across her knees, old prayers slipping through her teeth. The town held still, until the undertaker stepped into the light. Hat off. Hands raised. Let the boy speak, he said softly, even if he don't use words. Elijah stepped forward, unarmed. He passed the spot where Langtree fell, dried blood dark against the dust. Past the saloon where they used to kick him like a dog. Past the sheriff's office where silence meant survival. And he kept walking until he stood before the same board where the bounty notice had once hung. Now empty. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the hawk pendant. He raised it into the light. The wind caught it and spun it slow. Sani stepped beside him. This one, she said, pointing to Elijah, crossed the spine of the earth for no coin, no glory, no name. Gave me life. Gave my people hope. The oldest warrior dismounted. His face was covered in white clay. A line of red crossed from brow to chin. He looked at Elijah. You carry 2 spirits, he said. Yours and your mother's. She who healed. She who bled. He turned to the town. We came to take vengeance, he said. Now we offer something else. Justice. The people began to move. First the widow, stepping from a ridge with her long rifle slung across her back. Then the blacksmith, who removed his apron and knelt. Then the saloon girl, who crossed herself and lowered her head. One by one, they came out, not in fear but in shame and awe. They remembered now what they'd ignored, what they'd stepped over, and what stood before them like a storm that chose not to destroy. The oldest warrior placed his hand on Elijah's shoulder. You stay, he said. You guard. We return only if called. Sani looked up at Elijah. Her eyes held sadness, but also peace. This is your mountain now. She turned, mounted, and rode with the others. No signal, no shout, just dust rising behind them like a wave. And then they were gone. Elijah stood alone. The street was still. No one moved until he turned, slow, calm, and walked back toward the chapel. A child followed. Then 2 more. The blacksmith stepped forward, bowed his head. Sheriff's badge is yours if you want it. Elijah didn't take it, didn't need it. He just kept walking. And somewhere, far above, the wind carried the sound of hooves one last time. The storyteller's voice returns for the final time. Some say the boy disappeared after that. Others swear he still watches that town from the hills, never speaking, always listening. All we know for sure is, on the day he opened that door, 30 riders answered. And the mountains moved for him.